No, you are.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Unapologetically Outspoken. Tara and I were talking, and we always do this. It's like, why aren't we recording? We've got some
Yeah.
good content here for you guys. So I was telling her how yesterday I bought stock because right now when the stock market is down and doing all these crazy things is the best time to buy. And I feel like so many people in the middle class, myself included for years, we miss out on it because we're so panicked about what our 401k looks like that we don't take any action or we pull our money out. And that's like the worst thing to do, like buy. So, anyhow, she was asking what I bought, and I was explaining I just got the index fund. There's a whole bunch of different index funds, but it basically mimics the S&P 500. And the reason that I do this now is because I was watching Jordan Belfer, who's like the wolf on Wall Street from that movie. And at one point in time, Tucker Carlson interviewed him. And Tucker was saying how he has like the top hedge fund manager or whatever that everybody knows. And Jordan Belfer was saying, you're wasting your money. Like, do not go with a hedge fund manager and go after all of these stocks and funds that everyone's talking about is like so attractive. He's like, just invest in the S&P 500. And Warren Buffett says the same thing. Like he's said that for decades now. He's, one of the richest men in the world. And so, I was looking into it, and I mean, they've done studies on this, how the only thing that has consistently grown and been secure and stable is the S&P 500. It always goes up, always. No matter what happens in the world, it always trends up. And so it's safe, but you also get a return. And so I don't know, after hearing that, I was like, that's the way I'm going because I don't have the patience to sit here and watch, each company and each stock. I want to just get the top 500.
That's why I don't do it. And I was telling Stephanie before we came on the podcast that when I left LAPD, I had to take my retirement and move it somewhere else. And I ended up with this investment firm because it was the only way I could move it without getting penalties. But I haven't invested in any particular stocks. It's just sitting there and it's been sitting there for 2 years. And my mom does all these investments and she and her husband, like, they look at the numbers daily. And I think that's why I haven't done anything because I don't have time to look at the numbers. I feel like I'm a complete idiot when it comes to anything related to investments. I don't even understand what I'm looking at. And so I've been hesitant to do anything. But, everyone's talking about this, stock market's crashing and everyone's losing money. But then you're hearing on the flip side, now's the time to invest.
Yeah, it absolutely is because it's going to go back up. It always does. Just like in 2008, like it always comes back around. And that was something I learned from my dad because I think he panicked in 2008 and took all of his money out. If he would have just left it alone, not even looked at his account and just left it in there, I forget how much growth it would have been, but like insane. Like
Yeah.
he would have accumulated a lot of wealth. But the thing is, like, if you invest in these funds, they manage the funds. So, like, they're constantly adjusting the fund to where you don't really have to do anything. It's
Wow.
like better if you just put your money and then just don't look at it. Just keep it in there until you get closer to retirement. And then you might want to like move it into bonds or something like that. But I will make a recommendation. This book changed my life. It's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I think that's what it's called. Let me look it up. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And it basically lays out everything you need to know about money, about investing, but in a way that even a kid could understand. Like he just talks so normal and explains things and like dumbs it down for people like me that, I don't have a finance degree. And
Right.
I feel like a lot of people do that. They talk like in these terms where it just like is a turnoff, but he makes it so easy. And I looked it up. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. His name is Ramit Sethi. You can get it on Amazon for like $10.
What's the last
It
name?
is so good. Huh?
What's the last name?
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Sethi or Seti. It's Sethi.
Okay. I'm going to have to get that.
It's good.
Okay.
That's what got me to finally deal with my 401k, because I did the same thing as you. I just had it sitting there, and you're literally losing money because of inflation.
Right.
Your money is becoming less and less valuable. So I did that, I don't know, a few years ago. And now when I look at how much it's grown in just a few years, I'm like, holy shit, I should have done this a long time ago.
So have you looked at anything since the whole tariff program started? Like, are you freaking out about any of your stocks?
No.
Okay.
I looked at it. I mean, I am not wealthy, so it's not like I lost millions of dollars, because I don't have millions of dollars, you know? So it did go down, you know, a little bit, but nothing to where I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible. And then yesterday it like peaked because I guess someone wrote a fake article, or no,
Yes.
someone posted, yeah, like on
It was
X.
something that was fake news. Yeah.
Yes. So then it peaked, and then later in the day it went back down. So that kind of motivated me when it went back down. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to buy because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I asked my mom yesterday what she thought of this whole tariff thing because she has a lot of stocks and investments, and she said that her stocks have taken a hit, like especially Apple, but she's totally in support of what Trump is doing with the tariffs.
Yeah, and I think, again, I know I already said this, but I just want to like make it clear because I saw what happened with my dad. It's easy to see that and panic and like take all your money out, but that's the worst thing to do. Just keep it in there and it will come back around. You know, I fully believe that it will. It always has. And especially with a company like Apple, you know, I think it might be rocky, but I mean, just imagine if you stick with it and then they bring their manufacturing to the United States and it goes up even more. So I don't know. That's the way that I look at it. But I am not an investor, so don't take my advice. Go read the book. That's the advice you should take. But yeah, so speaking of tariffs, we are now up to 70 countries, maybe more at this point. That was as of yesterday. 70 countries wanting to negotiate with Trump. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, you know, this is an incredible win. These are 70 countries that have always charged us tariffs that are now willing to either reduce them or in some cases get rid of them within a couple of days of Trump announcing this whole thing. I mean, how wild is that? That's a huge win that no media person is going to talk about.
But it should be also eye-opening for everybody in America who still like is panicking about the tariff program to realize 70 countries have been fucking us for how long?
Right. Exactly. And it was funny. I saw Eric Trump posted something like, I would hate to be the last country to reach out to my dad. That's not going to be good for you. And so I thought, like, that's true. And I'm glad he's putting it out there. But I was surprised. I came across this clip of big bad Ursula von der Leyen, who's head of the EU. And here's what she's now saying.
Come first and foremost at immense costs for U.S. consumers and businesses, but at the same time they have a massive impact on the global economy. Especially hard hit are the developing countries, and this is a major turning point for the United States. Nonetheless, we stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners. Because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table.
Ha, Ursula. I think it's so funny how she just like bashed Trump and complained about the tariffs, then wanted to do retaliatory tariffs against us, but now she's offering 0 tariffs. So funny how that all worked out in a couple of days.
Yeah, except that Trump is rejecting this 0 for 0 tariff proposal, and he says that it's not enough. So I want to play a clip of what he said during a press conference on Monday.
The EU has said that they have offered 0 for 0 tariffs on cars and industrial goods. Is that not enough?
Well, the EU, no, it's not. The EU has been very tough over the years. I always say it was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade. That's the reason it was formed. It was formed with all of the countries from Europe, I guess most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And they formed together to create a little bit of a monopoly situation, to create a unified force against the United States for trade. So they have NATO, which is largely the same countries, and they took advantage of us dollar-wise and militarily until I got there. You know, I was able to get $600 billion from NATO, where they paid NATO because most of these nations weren't even paying. We were paying for NATO, so we're paying them to guard them militarily, and they're screwing us on trade. So that's not a good combination. So now it's really turned around. It's the opposite, and the European Union's been very bad to us. They don't take our cars. Like Japan in that sense. They don't take our agricultural product. They don't take anything practically. And yet they send millions of cars in a year. Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMWs. They're sending millions and millions of cars into the U.S. But we don't have a car that's been sold to the European Union or other places. But let's go for the European Union. And it's not going to be that way. It's got to be fair and reciprocal. It's got to be fair. It's not fair.
He made a really good point there, because I think we mentioned this either Monday or last week, that they don't accept any of our agricultural products, which on one hand I understand because of all the chemicals and shit we put in our food, but you really don't see American cars here in Europe. I've seen a couple that have been imported, but for the most part, you don't see it at all. But we see European cars in the United States every second or third car.
Yeah, we've been getting completely screwed. And what's crazy is, I know I didn't realize it, and I think most people didn't realize it, because who wants to pay attention to tariffs? It sounds so boring. But once again, Trump is waking people up to how we have been treated as the middle class for the last, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and he was also asked if he's going to negotiate deals with any of these countries to lower tariffs. And he basically said, it's America first. He said there will be permanent tariffs and there can be negotiations because it's the only chance that we have to reset the table. And it's so far, it seems like he is willing to negotiate in some aspects, because he posted on Truth Social yesterday about South Korea. And I'm just going to read directly from the post. He said, quote, "I just had a great call with the acting president of South Korea. We talked about their tremendous and unsustainable surplus tariffs, shipbuilding, large-scale purchases of U.S. LNG, their joint venture in an Alaskan pipeline, and payment for the big-time military protection we provide to South Korea. They began these military payments during my first term, billions of dollars, but sleepy Joe Biden, for reasons unknown, terminated the deal. This was a shocker to all. In any event, we have the confines and the probability of a great deal for both countries. Their top team is on a plane headed to the U.S. and things are looking good. We are likewise dealing with many other countries, all of whom want to make a deal with the United States. Like South Korea, we are bringing up other subjects that are not covered by trade and tariffs and getting them negotiated also." And then in all caps, "One-stop shopping is a beautiful and efficient process. China also wants to make a deal badly, but they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. It will happen. God bless the USA."
Okay, you know what? I just heard about this morning with South Korea. The timing's wild, because they just had North Korean soldiers come over the line, and they actually had to shoot warning shots.
Oh, wow.
And it didn't escalate. The North Korean soldiers retreated. But I mean, how crazy is the timing for that? Because now I'm sure they're on alert and probably really thinking about how they need the United States for military protection.
Yeah.
And, are going to be more willing to make a deal, I would think.
Especially if things are escalating with China, because, he mentioned China in that post, but this was what's all over the news yesterday, was the new tariff plan with China. So, Stephanie, to me, it seems like a game of chicken, right? Because Trump's not backing down and China's not backing down, and we both just keep upping the ante on retaliatory tariffs. And it's just at a point of ridiculousness almost, in my opinion, because it was the initial 20% tariffs that, they didn't like it and put a tariff on us. So then Trump tacks on another 34% reciprocal tariff, and then China does the same to us. So then Yesterday, Trump adds another 50% tariff, which makes the total tariffs on Chinese imports 104%, which is supposed to go into effect today. And so China's Commerce Ministry announced yesterday that Trump's additional 50% tariff is, quote, a mistake upon a mistake. But let's listen to what Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say about it and the absolutely epic way she called out Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the process. I fucking love her.
Has he signed anything in terms of an executive order, any documentation around that? Will that additional 50% go into effect tomorrow?
They will be going into effect at 12:01 a.m. tonight, so effectively tomorrow, yes. Look, I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that she and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So China has to call first?
The Chinese want to make a deal. They just don't know how to do it. But the president will be implementing these 104% tariffs on China tonight.
Under what conditions might he consider lowering tariffs on China at this point?
It would be imprudent of me to tell you those conditions here from the podium. I do just want to point out one thing, that the president, everybody in Washington, whether they want to admit it or not, knows that this president is right when it comes to tariffs and when it comes to trade. In fact, Democrats have long said that the United States of America has been ripped off by the countries around the world. They just don't want to admit it now because it's President Trump who is saying that. In June of 1996, Nancy Pelosi spoke on the House floor. She urged her colleagues at the time to fight against the status quo trade policies that had contributed to America's trade deficit with China. In fact, Nancy Pelosi said, how far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit? How many jobs have to be lost for the American workers? How much dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? Those are the words of Nancy Pelosi in 1996. Well, President Trump is finally answering her call 27 years later. Nancy Pelosi can thank President Trump today for the 104% retaliatory tariff that will be going into effect on China. In 2007, Chuck Schumer spoke of our nation's crippling trade deficit, saying these are the kinds of records the American people don't want us to be breaking. The administration needs to move beyond words, take action now to reverse a trend that threatens our prospects for future economic growth. And Chuck Schumer said that in 2007. Finally, in 2025, President Trump is taking action.
I'm going to guess
love
that
her.
these comments from Pelosi were well before she made her millions of dollars in
Yeah.
shady
before
trade
she-
deals.
Right, exactly. I just love Caroline Leavitt. Like, she could just drop the mic and walk out. It's just, she brings up so many good points. I came across this guy on TikTok yesterday who's just a small independent journalist, and he was in the White House, like, as a press guy back in Trump's first term, and he was talking about how different it is this time around, because he was saying back then all the left-wing media, they would push everyone out and just take up all the seats, and they would shout at the podium and just bash Trump. And I remember that. They were like ruthless. And he was saying how different it is now, where, you know, everyone's calm. They wait to be called on. They, you know, treat everyone with respect. And he was saying it's because of Caroline Leavitt. Like, she will not take any shit. And if you try to, she will embarrass you. He's like, she will humiliate these reporters and make them feel so stupid, or just kick them out. And he said, so they're all respecting her. And he said it's such a better place to be in, just, you know, as someone in the press. So I think that's awesome. But speaking of the left-leaning media, I almost fell out of my chair because I came across this clip from CNN that actually was talking about the positive aspect of tariffs. This was Jake Tapper. He was interviewing steel workers, and I thought they brought up some great points. So let me play that clip.
Recession warning. Some applaud President Trump's tariffs. The CEO of Marlin Steel in Baltimore, Maryland, says he's thrilled with the tariffs. His plant makes wire baskets and sheet metal for industries ranging from aerospace to food processing. Here's what one factory worker of his told us.
One of the products that we made was our competition was from Canada, and they were using Chinese steel, and it's become more profitable, and it's exciting. So very optimistic about it.
Joining us now is the CEO of Marlin Steel, Drew Greenblatt, who joins us from the floor of his company. Drew, thank you so much for joining us. So you say you're a big fan of the tariffs. Your company exports to dozens of countries, including China. Chinese leaders now say they're prepared for a full-on trade war with the United States. If China stops buying Marlin Steel, how much of a hit will your business take, or will the tariffs help you in other ways that make up for it?
Tariffs are going to be very good for the American manufacturing worker. We're very excited about this new leveling of the playing field. Right now, when we export, for example, this basket to Germany right here, it's a precision medical basket, a medical device basket. When we ship that to Germany, the German government taxes our clients $128.95 per basket. If a German competitor ships it to America, it's $1.25 per basket. It is so unfair what's happening to the American worker. They can't compete when you have that kind of unlevel playing field. We're talking about an opportunity finally to create a lot of millions of American jobs, middle-class jobs, if we could get it fair. We're not looking for something over the German factory workers or the British factory workers, the Chinese factory workers. We just want to be fair.
Back with our
I thought he did a great job of explaining that. Like, how pissed would you be if you made a product and you send it overseas and you have to pay $124 per unit in tariffs, but they could send it here for $1.24 per unit?
Yeah.
Like, that's wild. But that's what's been happening for a long time now.
Well, while you were playing that clip, I just got a little breaking news alert across my phone saying that China is now doing their retaliatory tariffs with slapping us with 84% tariffs in response to Trump's 104% tariffs. And apparently, what did it say? Beijing has said that they will not back down. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Yan said, quote, judging from its actions, the U.S. doesn't seem to be serious about having talks right now. If the U.S. truly wants to talk, it should let people see that they're ready to treat others with equality, respect, and mutual benefit. So it'll be interesting to see how Trump responds to this.
Yeah. I mean, we're their biggest consumer base. Americans love to buy a lot of stuff. And I don't know. I mean, they say no one wins a trade war, but if I were these other 70 countries, I'm sure they're jumping on, like, how can we leverage this? Like Japan was the first one to reach out to Trump, and maybe they'll start taking over some of this manufacturing. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't think Trump's going to respond too kindly to that.
No, I don't think so. And the other thing is, Congress isn't responding too kindly right now either. We talked about the Trade Review Act that was introduced last week by Chuck Grassley and Maria Cantwell. And now Senator Ron Wyden announced yesterday that he's going to force a vote on repealing Trump's tariffs. And I wanted to play a clip, but I can't because it came from Bloomberg. And now they're giving me some nonsense about how I need to subscribe if I want to open the article.
I wonder about this because I was thinking, okay, if the Republicans are already on board with this and the Democrats obviously don't want to do anything Trump wants to do, this will go through. But then I also heard that if it does go through, Trump will just use his veto power and veto it. Mm-hmm. So that was hopeful. But who knows? I mean, that could then go to court and you'll get some judge that tries to stop it. But that brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is he had two big Supreme Court wins. Actually, I think there were three, but the main two was the first one, the Supreme Court lifted the injunction of Trump's deportations of Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act, saying that the court that objected over the removal of these gang members didn't have proper jurisdiction. And so this was a 5-4 decision. And Tara, I want to get your opinion on this. Amy Coney Barrett voted again with the liberals. This seems to be a trend with her. I'm starting to think that she's like secretly liberal and just like pretending to be a conservative.
A lot of people are so pissed at her right now. I've seen how they're calling her a traitor because this is not the first time that she has sided with the liberal judges against Trump in a Supreme Court decision. She also voted against his freeze on foreign aid back in March. So, everything I'm seeing is very negative, and you have to question where does her loyalty lie?
I know. Part of me wonders, is she getting threatened? Because remember, like, protesters were camped out outside of her house for a while. Or is she just, sticking with the girls? Like, I don't know, but this is a trend now, and I don't like it. So anyhow, the court wrote, quote, AEA detainees must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the act. The notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs, end quote. So basically, they can keep deporting illegal criminals via the Alien Enemies Act as long as they give them time to challenge the decision, and these people can sit in the immigration courts for that. So I think it's a great win. Attorney General Pam Bondi posted on X saying, an activist judge in Washington, D.C. does not have the jurisdiction to seize control of President Trump's authority to conduct foreign policy and keep the American people safe. So hopefully this sets a precedent that these district level judges don't have the jurisdiction to interfere with the president's agenda. And I'm hoping it'll stop them from continuing to issue these injunctions left and right on Trump's policies. But I don't know if it actually will.
Yeah, Megyn Kelly actually had a really good episode over the weekend where they were talking about this. And she had 2 legal experts on. I think they're ones that come on her show frequently. But they were basically talking about how it was total judicial overreach. And just like you said, it was like they don't have the jurisdiction to do this. And they had a pretty interesting argument about it where it was just like there's no way the Supreme Court can allow this. And so I'm really glad to see that they didn't. But on the topic of deporting illegals, I want to mention that the Department of Homeland Security announced that they're going to be revoking the protected status of almost 1 million illegal migrants who came into the country through Biden's CBP One app, which we've talked about at length. And on top of that, DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin told Reuters yesterday that illegal migrants should try to use the app to self-deport and leave the country now. And she added, quote, if they don't, they will face the consequences. This includes a fine of $998 per day for every day that the illegal alien overstays their final deportation, end quote. And this is legal because this all has to do with a 1996 law, and Trump enforced it during his first administration, and I don't think there were lawsuits over that. But let's see how long it takes for a lawsuit to be filed against the Trump administration for doing this.
Yeah, I think there's been more judges stopping him than there were in the past, I don't know, what was it, 10 or 20 years or something? It's just crazy.
Yeah, but I feel like I just want to remind everybody, we talked about this before he got into office when, the Biden and the Congress, they were just fucking loading up the courts with all these liberal judges. And, everyone was so excited about Trump winning that, we weren't looking at the impact that this infestation in the legal system could have on his agenda, and they're trying to stop him at every turn.
Yeah, they're the party of lawfare now.
Yeah.
Well, the next Supreme Court ruling blocked a San Francisco judge's order for Trump to rehire thousands of federal employees. So this injunction was the one on March 13th that ordered 6 agencies to reinstate thousands of recently hired probationary employees. So these weren't even longtime federal employees. These were people still on probation. So you know who brought the case in San Francisco? It was 9 nonprofit organizations, more NGOs. So they're definitely covering their tracks of fraud, I'm sure. But anyhow, the Supreme Court said that they lacked the legal standing to sue. Obviously. I mean, think about it. Like, nonprofits are trying to stop the president of the United States from firing federal workers.
Yeah.
Why would they think they have the jurisdiction to interfere with presidential actions? So again, I think this sets another good precedent for Trump moving forward. I mean, if this precedent's set, like, will they keep bringing the lawsuits? They'll probably still try, but I would think it would get shot down right away. And I'm really surprised at how quickly these have moved to the Supreme Court. Because I was listening to a legal analyst a few weeks ago, and he was saying that, this could drag on for years. You know how the court system is, and that's what these people were banking on, that they're not going to win ultimately, but they can just drag it out because it's going to take forever to get to the Supreme Court. So the fact that the Supreme Court heard it and ruled within a month is impressive. And I hope it sends a message to these liberal judges that they're not going to tolerate these absurd district level rulings against the administration.
Well, I think this also shows that they can move at an appropriate speed and not delay things for years and years. So we should all be paying attention to that too. It's like the complete, I call it the DMV of the federal justice system, because the DMV sucks. And speaking of, not the DMV, but the federal system, I have some more fun Doge cuts to talk about today. Fox News reported yesterday that Doge announced $51 million in cuts from the U.S. African Development Foundation. So let's take a look at what some of these are for. $230,000 to market 100% organic shea butter in Burkina Faso. $246,000 for mango drying facilities in the Ivory Coast. $240,000 for marketing pineapple in Benin. $100,000 to increase yogurt production in Uganda, $84,000 for a business incubator for spa and wellness entrepreneurs in Nigeria. I don't even know what a business incubator is. $50,000 to train farmers how to grow dragon fruit in Senegal, and $48,000 for a WhatsApp marketing chatbot in Kenya.
I mean, can you imagine being a farmer here in the United States and seeing that? 50,000 to train farmers in Senegal. Come on.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
I know. Or it's a business incubator for spa and wellness entrepreneurs. But let's talk about more wasted money, and this time it's defense spending, because according to a report obtained by Senator Joni Ernst, during the fiscal years 2023 and 2024, union members at the Defense Health Agency, which is the department that oversees the military's healthcare benefits under TRICARE that I am unfortunately very familiar with, they spent 87,000 hours and $3.3 million. And was this to take care of the troops? No. This was on their own contract negotiations. 87,000 hours in contract negotiations. That's insane. And when they were asked why so much time and money was spent on labor negotiations, a spokesperson for the department said the agency was undergoing, quote, a significant transition. And I guess at the time, only like 36% of their seats were filled. But it's like, no wonder every time I called TRICARE, because that is the health insurance I have through my husband's retirement, it takes forever to get anybody on the phone. And it's probably because they're wasting their time.
How much you want to bet they were probably working from home and just logging their hours as like, oh yeah, we're working on contracts.
Right.
When really they're like at the beach or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's so aggravating. Okay. Wait, by the way, did you hear that Trump had said something about how Elon Musk unveiled something really terrible?
Yes. Remember, we talked about that a couple days ago, and Elon said it, Trump said it. Caroline Leavitt also alluded to that yesterday.
Well, yeah. Okay. So that's what was throwing me off, because I know we talked about it, but then I heard her say that like recently, and I'm like, is this another, like a new thing? And are they actually going to talk about it? Because Elon made it sound like, I don't want to get assassinated, so I'm not going to move forward with it.
Said she was not going to talk about it until the president was ready to talk about it. So They're
Well, now I want to
revealing,
know.
I know, because they're revealing all this shit. And this is something so big and they're not talking about it yet, which means it has to be really big or
Yeah.
something really critical.
Or maybe they're getting like everyone, the DOJ and FBI, all who knows. But
Yeah.
now I'm like on the edge of my seat because I thought this was something we're just never going to hear about. But then I'm like, wait, did they just actually announce it in a press conference? So
Yep.
we'll see. But speaking of defense spending, Mark Ritter, who's the Secretary General of NATO, went on Face the Nation. And he actually was praising Trump because ever since Trump demanded European countries to pay their fair share and build up their own defense, he said that billions of dollars have been pouring in, and European countries are actually starting to take responsibility instead of just relying on the United States. And he was explaining that, like, if things would have stayed the same, they would not be able to defend themselves in another 2 to 3 years. So I just think it's really funny how all of these European leaders were bashing Trump, a month ago, and now they're all kissing his ass. And I keep picturing Trump as like the dad that finally cuts off his grown son and makes him get a job and like kicks him out of the house. That's kind of how Europe is right now. And I'm loving it.
When you were talking, I had an image in my mind. And it was actually, I was thinking, before you even said any of this, I was thinking, it's kind of like when you have a spouse and they work, but they keep all their money to themselves and they just want to spend your money.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
finally he's like, no, you're going to fucking contribute too.
Yeah. Like, I'm done. I'm cutting you off.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yeah. So, well, we will see. But I got to switch gears here and talk about COVID because there was another COVID report that exposed how the Biden admin basically tried to hide this from the public. And this one was about 7 American military members who participated in the World Military Games in Wuhan in October of 2019. And the report is stating that it's very likely they contracted COVID during that time. And again, this was several months before the pandemic was actually announced. So this report originally came out in December of 2022, and we never heard about it. And by law, which according to the National Defense Authorization Act, this was mandated to be released to the public, but the Biden admin didn't. So why, right? Because this would have completely contradicted the narrative that there was no evidence of COVID before, December. And they also apparently, like Biden spokesperson John Kirby, he told the press that there was no evidence that any Americans contracted COVID during the World Military Games. And he said that the military had no knowledge of any of these infections among troops who participated in the games, but clearly they did. So why would they hide it? Maybe because they knew the narrative they were feeding us was a complete fucking lie, because there are so many little coincidences that add up with this story. The games were held right next to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where, Dr. Fauci and our government knew that Chinese scientists were conducting gain-of-function research that was all being funded by American tax dollars. And how strange that these American athletes who traveled to and from Wuhan all flew in and out of the Seattle-Tacoma airport, which was one of the earliest COVID hotspots in the US, which I remember distinctly because I was working in Washington at the time. And how strange that military athletes from Germany and France and Italy and Luxembourg, who also competed in the games, they all reported COVID symptoms after their stay in Wuhan. But we're supposed to believe there's absolutely no connection to any of these things, right? Because that would have defied the narrative. And it's like, nobody cares now because it's several years later. And the MSM has spent the whole time supporting Biden's lies, and everyone has conveniently forgotten COVID because of the madness of everything else that's happened over the past few years. But I wanted to bring up this report because I'm not seeing it anywhere else. It was only made public last week when the Trump admin uploaded it to the Defense Department website. And this is just more evidence that the virus was circulating in Wuhan and the United States government knew about it before it was made public in December of 2019. And they lied the whole time.
Surprise, surprise. It's like, what didn't they lie about? That's the real question we should be asking. It's just crazy. But speaking of COVID, Joe Rogan had on Dr. Suzanne Humphries. That was an amazing episode. Very, very eye-opening. I mean, it kind of threw me for a loop because some of the points she was making just has me kind of rethinking a lot of things around medical care. So I recommend that episode. But anyhow, she brought up something that I had never heard before about COVID that would prove it was made in the lab. And the doctor that I guess wrote the paper on it the paper ended up being redacted and like hidden from the public. So listen to this from Joe Rogan's podcast where she explains what happened.
There's one guy named Pradhan, Pradhan, who he showed that there is a GP120 protein on the spike. And he said it was an uncanny similarity to the GP120 and HIV, and that there was no way that that would have come out of nowhere and showed up in the 2019 COVID epidemic. And he showed genetically how that just couldn't possibly happen. A flurry of emails went through the CDC and to NIAID and to Fauci, and within 6 days of that paper being in preprint, it was removed. 6 days. And what we've got access from the Freedom of Information Act to some of those emails. They're a bit heavily redacted, but that was the series of events that happened with that medical.
Okay, so I was wrong. It wasn't redacted. It was removed. They completely hid it from the public.
Like, there has to be some kind of accountability with the Trump administration. I'm hoping, because all of the shit that has come out over the last couple of years that the Biden admin has completely lied about, that, again, I've said this 1,900 times, so many people's lives were ruined because of COVID, and it's all just been swept under the carpet, and I just can't let it go. And there needs to be some fucking accountability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I hope there is, and I hope when Trump said he's going to overturn the pardons on, everyone, but that would include Fauci, I hope that's because they're planning on pressing criminal charges at some point.
I don't know how the Supreme Court or judges have not ruled against this whole pardon thing, because how can you have a fucking pardon when there has been no crime? I mean, again, we know there's been a crime, but they haven't been committed of a crime. So how can you pardon someone who hasn't been committed of a crime? There's no fucking preemptive pardon. It doesn't exist.
Well, and if the Supreme Court is hearing all of these things about the Trump administration so quickly, maybe it will go up to them quick, and maybe, there will be some accountability. I mean, again, I've kind of lost hope at this point, but it's only April. I have to keep reminding myself, he has not been in there very long, and he's done a lot so far.
Yes.
I got to be patient.
Yes. And there's these constant, legal interventions and cock blocking going on. So yeah, just got to give it time and trust. Okay. So remember last week we were talking about Cory Booker's 25-hour record-breaking anti-Trump clown show marathon speech in Congress, and all the libtards were cheering it. Well, I read an article yesterday in Town Hall that indicates he might be facing some trouble for this little speech of his. So there's a nonpartisan ethics watchdog group that has asked the Senate Ethics Committee to investigate Booker to determine whether he violated a rule that prohibits senators from linking official action to soliciting for campaign contributions. So there was a letter that was sent to the Ethics Committee by the nonpartisan watchdog group is called FA. And the executive director, Kendra Arnold, said, quote, "It is clear that Senator Booker's Senate floor speech had a campaign purpose. Before he even began speaking, he announced his upcoming speech on his campaign social media. During his speech, he sent a series of emails that campaigned and sought valuable supporter information and campaign contributions based on his Senate floor speech. Immediately after his speech, Booker sent an email that requested donations for his campaign and asked the DNC if the recipient liked what they saw him do on the Senate floor." And so the article links screenshots. You can see Booker's X account. There's a message saying everywhere you can follow him. And then it says, we must speak up. If you are inspired by what you saw today, split a contribution between Cory Booker and the DNC. And then underneath that, there was a link to where people could click and make a contribution. So Arnold, posted all this and said, based upon his pre-planned Senate floor speech, which is certainly an official activity. In essence, by employing this tactic, Senator Booker indicates to potential contributors that his official actions can be influenced by campaign contributions. This is exactly the kind of appearance of impropriety that the Senate Ethics Committee Moreover, this tactic dangerously incentivizes other senators to follow suit and engage in similar performances on the Senate floor with the aim of raising campaign funds and building email lists and supporter lists for future elections. Rather than focusing on official business, the Senate floor will increasingly be seen as a campaign venue and treated as such. This must not be allowed to occur. Senators who are nearly always raising campaign funds will be rightly seen as making important official decisions based on what will bring in the most money, not on the merits of an issue. So I agree. And I love that she brought this up to the committee. Although, as usual, I highly doubt it's going to go anywhere because, as we know, our Congress is just one big theater performance. But it's like the receipts are there. It was a very clear violation of the Senate ethics rules.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it going anywhere either, especially since we have the uniparty in Congress. But it just reminds me, like when you're in somewhere like a big city, like let's say you're in Vegas, for example, and you have those street performers and they'll put on a show and then they walk around with their hat and they want everyone to give them a tip. Like that's essentially what he was doing.
Yeah.
While he should be, actually doing his job. It's just ridiculous. It's like such a clown show. But anyhow, I'm totally switching gears, but you're going to be interested in this, okay? Remember when we covered the OpenAI whistleblower's death and how we didn't think it was a suicide?
Yep.
And for anyone that missed that episode, Suchir Balaji was a 26-year-old that worked at OpenAI and went to the New York Times with information on OpenAI that was damaging. A month later, he was found dead in his apartment, and it was almost immediately ruled a suicide. So the Daily Mail reported that his parents spent around $100,000 and got a second autopsy and found that there were 2 gunshot wounds to the head, and both were not immediately fatal. So that completely destroys this narrative that he shot himself in the head. And then on top of that, they found evidence that he had multiple job offers and planned academic events, which would also go against the suicide narrative. And it's like sad because I'm glad they found this evidence and they're getting some answers. But the reality is that they're probably not going to ever get justice because I can't imagine San Francisco is going to admit that they got it wrong and then go and conduct a real investigation to find who killed him. But I don't know, you were an investigator. What do you make of this new autopsy?
Well, first, I just want to say that I think it's really disturbing that the only place you're seeing anything about this is really in the Daily Mail, because I got that article and I looked at it and then I wanted to look up and see who else was reporting on it. Nobody is talking about this except there's a publication in India that mentioned it. But this is a big deal. And honestly, it should have been clear from the crime scene alone the first time that this wasn't a suicide, but we already know it was a murder and they did a terrible job of covering it up. And I think his parents are incredibly brave for going against the system to speak the truth. And the second autopsy, there's so many details. Like, it not only shows that he was shot twice, but there's other injuries on his body that are totally inconsistent with the initial suicide report. The new report reveals he had extensive lacerations and discoloration on his tongue, and that these could not have been caused by the gunshot to his forehead because of the angle that the bullet traveled. And it shows a broken cheekbone, an injury to the side of his head that weren't on the original medical examiner's report. There are photos. I think we talked about this initially. The parents took photos of the scene, like when they were there. Mm-hmm. And the photos, like, are totally not consistent with the narrative of the suicide. And one of them shows an injury with like an injury to his knee and blood that's like not consistent at all with the initial findings. I think we talked originally when we were talking about this case about the synthetic hair that was found at the scene. And it was like in a pool of blood next to his own hair. So his parents thought that he had like pulled the hair out of a wig or someone's head or something. And then his mom brought up so many good questions. She's like, why is there bleeding and a wound on his knee? Why does he have a head injury? Why is his tongue ripped? Why do the pictures show he was spitting blood outside the bathroom when the crime allegedly occurred in the bathroom? Why did they find a date rape drug in his system? Because the reports show he had GHB in his system. And she said, why doesn't the autopsy account for the other wounds? There's something about a metal object in his skull that was found on the second autopsy. Why is his cheekbone broken? How can someone sedated shoot themselves in this weird downward angle? And these are all valid questions. And I don't understand how nobody is investigating any of this and nobody will touch it because it was a politically motivated murder and a cover-up.
Don't you think this medical examiner needs to be investigated? I mean, how do you overlook that much evidence that they compiled?
Yeah, but didn't we talk about the medical examiners' ties to Pelosi? Like,
and has been involved in shady stuff before.
Yeah.
But that's why I think it's not going to go anywhere, because you've got Pelosi and, she's a big investor in OpenAI. So there's that connection.
Right. And that's why no other media outlet is talking about this when this is huge.
What do you make of the tongue being ripped? Do you think that was like a signal, like, because he talked to the New York Times and like kind of a warning to other employees, like, you better keep your mouth shut? Or is that, I've never heard of that before.
Because they didn't mention it at all in the first autopsy report. Like, maybe, I don't know. This whole thing is so shady, and I don't know that we're ever going to get legitimate answers, but it is so clear that the evidence does not add up to the story that's being told. So
that poor mother, I can't imagine.
No. And like, again, I think they're incredibly brave especially when she went on Tucker a couple months ago and talked about everything. I hope he has her back on again to kind of give an update on all this, because again, nobody's talking about it. And this is like definitely not a suicide. So in other news, I have to bring up a interesting science topic, Stephanie, because I want to get your take on this. And this was like all over the news yesterday. There's a biotech company called Colossal Biosciences. I think they were established in 2021. And what they're doing is they're de-extincting different species of animals through genetic engineering. And I'm sorry, this is like a scene straight out of Jurassic Park, because yesterday it was announced that they used ancient fossil DNA to create 2 dire wolves. Now, dire wolves have been extinct for over 10,000 years, and people know about them because they were like in the Game of Thrones series, Did you watch that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the dire wolves were like a big part of the storyline. But again, they've been extinct for over 10,000 years. The researchers used DNA from a 13,000-year-old direwolf tooth and a 72,000-year-old skull, combined with the genes from modern-day gray wolves to make, quote, healthy direwolf puppies. And you can go online and you can look at these puppies. Their names are Remus and Romulus. There's a younger female apparently also, which they named Khaleesi after Game of Thrones. But they're adorable. However, I find this incredibly disturbing. And last month, this same company genetically engineered what they're calling a woolly mouse, because it's a mouse that has long, thick, woolly hair like the woolly mammoth. And now they're talking about literally de-extincting the woolly mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and the dodo bird. So do you think this is cool or scary?
I think it's terrifying. Like you said, have we learned nothing from Jurassic Park? It's not a good idea to play God and bring back animals that have been extinct for ages. It's just not. It never ends well. And of course, as I looked into this, they're doing this in the name of climate change, so immediately I call bullshit. I found this Forbes article, and they said that the woolly mammoth would expose grasslands in the Arctic. And that's good because the permafrost thawing in the Arctic is causing CO2 emissions. But it also means that microorganisms and potential viruses that have been, frozen for all these years could be unearthed. So, are we prepared for that? And then my question, too, is, what does this mean for existing species? What are unintended consequences are we going to find out down the road? I don't agree with playing God. I feel like it's very creepy and it has Jurassic Park vibes, and I don't like it.
Yeah, me
But
too.
they are cute, and they're all over my TikTok feed.
They're
Everywhere.
adorable. I
Yeah.
want to play with them. They look so adorable. But I just think this is a very dangerous slope. And anytime you start fucking with genetics and science and trying to resurrect things that no longer exist, it's not a good thing.
It's like Frankenstein kind of too, Ugh, it's creepy. Okay, well, I have something that I think is exciting around science, but you might think it's creepy, so I'll get your take on it. But there's this guy, Dr. Peter Diamandis, and he is an entrepreneur with degrees from MIT and Harvard, and he's this big entrepreneur that's known for his ideas and investments towards using technology to create this abundant utopian future where we just live forever and never die, okay? So he posted on X, quote, "We're so close to longevity escape velocity that I urge you to remember that your sole responsibility right now is to avoid dying from something stupid." Okay, so this got so much attention. And TechCrunch actually interviewed him to ask, what do you mean by that? So this is what he said, quote, "I feel like we're in the midst of a health span revolution, and this is not by chance. It's the impact of mostly AI, computation, sensors, single-cell sequencing, cellular machines, a whole slew of converging technologies that are helping us understand why we age, how to slow it, stop it, potentially reverse it. There's a concept called longevity escape velocity, and it's the notion that today, for every year that you're alive, science and medicine are extending your lifespan by a certain amount of time, between a quarter of a year per year to a third of a year per year. But there will be a point at which, for every year that you're alive, science extends your life for more than a year." Aubrey de Grey and Ray Kurzweil pioneered the idea. I've researched it, I've invested in it. And the current thinking is we're going to hit longevity escape velocity if you're not of reasonable means and in good health sometime in the next decade. So he's saying in the next decade, they could have this technology where you can just your life is going to be extended because technology is so advanced that they're going to actually slow down or completely reverse aging.
Okay, but if he's saying for every year you're alive, it could extend your lifespan for another year, does that mean you just never die?
Yeah. That's this guy truly thinks that. Now, this sounds crazy, right? But Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump's husband, he was talking about this years ago because he's invested in all this stuff. And he's saying, I'm really trying to keep my body as healthy as possible because I think we're going to be the first generation to live forever. So they're serious about this. There's a lot of money invested in it. And here's where I'm going to go weird for a minute, but what I find interesting is when Trump started talking about the golden age, and then we had the age of Aquarius that they're saying we've entered, right? I started researching all of these civilizations throughout history that had this golden age. And it always lined up with the age of Aquarius. And in their writings, they would talk about how there's abundance for all and longevity, where people live a very long life with no ailments and no suffering. And I think that's interesting because, of course, we're in the age of Aquarius again. Trump says we're entering the golden age in America. So, is this a cycle, just like in the past, where we're going to reach abundance for all and longevity and maybe it'll happen in our lifetime. Like, I don't know. I think it's far-fetched, but I think it's kind of cool to think about.
Okay, I'm going to present the creepy angle of this because if that's the case, like you just said, the golden age goes in cycles with the age of Aquarius, right? So at some point, this abundance and longevity would come to an end, right? And so what happens then? And I also
AI
think,
takes over the world.
right? And I think, okay, it sounds great to have no ailments and no suffering, but then would this mean that people would just have to keep working? You know, like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, right? It's just you just keep on going and you just keep on doing the same thing for God knows how long, and that just seems so unappealing to me.
You're like, I want out. I'm done. My time is put in. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but it's getting a lot of attention, and I do think it's interesting that there's all of these big tech people that actually think it's a possibility. I mean, it's not just some crazy guy. Like they're investing a lot of money in it.
Yeah. Well, look at all the advances that have been made in science and in cellular technology and medicine just in the last few years. So I can see where this is theoretically a possibility. I just don't know that I would want it.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people would feel that way. And then, what about your religious beliefs and stuff? Like, okay, people that believe that you're going to go to heaven, well, wouldn't you want that instead of being here on earth forever? And like, there's just a lot of weird things to think about, but I don't know. It's an interesting topic that you can explore.
It's like vampires come to life, except without having to drink blood.
Yeah. Didn't they make a movie about that where they figured out how people could live forever and they did? They were like vampires.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is creepy. There is a creepy angle. I knew you would find the creepy angle. I see your point. All right. Well, that'll give you guys something to think about, but enjoy the rest of the week. We'll see you back here on Friday. Thanks for tuning in.